Hi everyone, I am Mahalakshmi, Head Department of Costume Design and Fashion, AJK College of Arts and Science, Navakkarai, Palakkad. Today I am going to deliver a topic about knitting. So what is knitting? Knitting is the process of manufacturing a fabric by interlooping of yarns. Here in weaving we will interlace the warp and weft yarn, but in knitting we will interloop the coarse and waves yarn. So knitting is the second most important method of fabric formation. So it can be defined as a needle technique of fabric formation in which with the help of knitting needles, loops are formed to make a fabric or garment. So fabric can be formed by hand or machine knitting, but the basic principles remains exactly the same. Example, pulling a new loop through the old loop. So knitted fabrics are popular for their shape, fitting property, soft handle, bulk in nature and high extension at low tension. So next, types of knits. Here we have two different categories of knitted fabrics. One is weft knitting, another one is warp knitting. Under weft knitting we have single jersey, pearl, rib and interlock. Under warp knitting we have tricot and racial. These are the two different categories which falls under warp knitting. So the classification of knitting. Knitting is primarily classified as weft knitting and warp knitting. This classification is based on the direction of movement of yarn with respect to the direction of the fabric formation. So in warp knitting, in case of the yarn which is run in direction length, say for example the direction of fabric formation during knitting, the process is called warp knitting. So I will repeat. In case the yarn run in length direction, example, the direction of fabric formation during knitting, the process is called warp knitting. The yarn inside the knitted fabrics are just like the warp yarn in woven fabrics. Such knitted fabrics are called warp knitted fabrics. And the machine which produces such fabric is known as warp knitting machine. Then warp knitting. Under warp knitting, we can produce two different kinds of fabric. One is tricot, another one is racial. So in weft knitting, the yarns runs the width or crossways direction with reference to the direction of fabric formation during knitting. Then the process of knitting is called weft knitting. I repeat, if the yarn runs in the width or crossways direction with reference to the direction of fabric formation during knitting, then the process of knitting is called weft knitting. Next one, needle loop. So basic unit of knitted structure is called needle loop. It will consist of a head that is denoted by letter H and two sides limbs or legs that will be denoted by letter L. At the base of each leg is a foot that is denoted by capital F, which measures through the head of the loop formed at the previous knitting cycle. The yarn passes from the foot of one loop into the foot and leg of the next loop formed by it. Next one is application of knitted fabrics. So we can apply the knitted fabrics like sportswear because of its conformity and flexibility. Then casual wears because of the comfort property of the knitted fabric. Then dresses wear, and also we can apply in technical textile applications. Then advantages of knitting. Fabric can be produced from minimum number of yarns, even only one yarn. Loop sizes can be varied to a wide extent and that too very easily. The extensibility and stability of the knitted fabrics can be engineered. Wastage of yarn during conversion of yarn into fabric by knitting is eligible. Then the desired property or compactness of the fabric can be achieved easily. The extensibility and stability of the knitted fabric can be engineered. The next topic is comparison of woven and knitted fabric. So knitting is comparatively economical, no need of preparation of yarn, that's why it is economical, and faster process to convert yarn into fabric or even into direct apparels. So here I am going to compare the woven and knitted fabric properties. In woven, it will produce by interlacing of yarn, but in knitting it will be produced by interlooping of holds and veils. In weaving, set of yarn is required for warp and weft, but in knitting minimum one yarn is required. In weaving, elasticity and stretch ability is very poor, but in knitting, it is a good elasticity and stretchable. We can get it. The dimension stability is very poor in woven fabric. The dimension stability is not stable in knitted fabric. So it is more durable, it is less durable. In woven fabric, less moisture absorption will be there. But in knitted fabric, wicking and moisture property will be better. So the good durability we can achieve in woven fabric, but in knitted fabric the drape will be very poor. Less crease resistance property will occur in woven fabric, but we can get a good grease resistance and no need of ironing for knitted fabric. So the air permeability property is very poor in woven fabric. But in other case, in knitted fabric, it is very excellent in air permeability. Then tensile and tear strength can be checked, but bursting strength checked rather than the tensile strength is high in knitted fabric. Then the next topic is common knitting terms. So the first one is technical phase. The side of the knitted fabric having all of face of knit loop is called technical phase of the fabric. Then the technical back. The side of knitted fabric consists of back loops is called technical back of the fabric. Then fabric weight. Following units are provided for fabric weight: grams per square meter, that is denoted by capital GSM. GSM is refers to as grams per square meter, that is equal to weight in grams in area, loop length centimeter, that is divided by 10,000. So ounce per square yard of fabric will be calculated by using ounce to GSM, that is equal to ounce per square yard into 33.906. To calculate the GSM, we have to follow these formulas. The common knitting terms: stitch length. The stitch length is one of the most important factor controlling the properties of knitted fabrics. The stitch length measured in millimeter is the length of yarn in the knitted loop. Generally, longer the stitch length, the more open and lighter the fabric. Next one is stitch density. Stitch density is a term frequently used in the knitting and represent the total number of needles looped in the given area. Stitch density is the product of hose and veils per unit length and is measured in units of loops per square centimeter. Next one is veils. A veil is a vertical column of loops produced by the same needle knitting at successive knitting cycle. The number of veils determine the width of the fabric and they are measured in units of veils per centimeter. Then causes are rows of loops across the width of the fabric produced by adjacent needles during the same knitting cycle and are measured in the units of cause per centimeter. The cause determine the length of the fabric. The next title is Basic Principles of Knitting. A knitted fabric may be made with a single yarn which is formed into interlocking loops with the help of hooked needles. According to the purpose of the fabric, the loops may be loosely or closely constructed. As the loops are interlocked in a knitted fabric, it can be stitched in any direction even when a low grade yarn having little elasticity is used. So the inlaid yarn can be napped into a pile in the finishing process and the fabric can be used to make sportswear and sweatshirts. Next, the knitting machine. Producing by 3-thread Fleecy knitting machine or producing by the multi-track circular knitting machines or by producing by the loop wheel or sninker wheel frame. The next one is the plush fabric. So the structure of the plush structure consists of the plain loop and elongated plush sninker loops which shows as a pipe between the veils on the technical back as a result of having been formed over a different surfaces to that of a normal length ground sninker loops with which they are plaited. Then it is achieved during finishing by cropping or shearing the loops in both directions to leave the individual fibers exposed as a soft velvet surface while the ground loops remain intact. So the knitting process will In snigger top lash needle machines, the ground yarn is fed into the snigger throat and the flush yarn is fed at higher level in drawn over the snigger nib. In snigger wheel machines, sniggers with two throats are employed. The shallow throat drawn as a long snigger loop with the flush yarns whistles. The deeply cut throat draws a normal length snigger loops with the ground yarn. Then the silver or high pile fabric. Silver or high pile fabric is consist of ground yarn and silver. The ground yarn forms a normal loop and the silver forms only a partially loop. The ends of the silver stands out the structure of the fabric, giving a highly pile effect. The high pile machine is a special single jersey circular machine which has a silver feeds where the silvers are drawn from cans and fed into the needle through the wires of the Dover roller. The end uses of this fabric is man-made furs, linings, gloves, cushions, industrial polishers and paint rollers. Next, the loop transfer stitch. Needle loop transfer. Plain loop transfer stitches produced by transference from one needle to another in the same bed. Rib loop transfer stitches produced by the transference a loop from one needle wear to other. Needle loop transfer can be produced by hand-in-hand flat knitting machines or with a transfer needle in computerized flat machine automatically. The next one is snigger loop transfer stitch. The apparatus of eyelet are formed at courses where adjacent plain veils move outwards as a result of the absence of connecting snigger loops. The next chapter is the four primary base structure of weft knitted fabric. So there are four primary base structures. They are plain, rib, interlock and purl, from which all weft knitted fabrics are derived. Each is composed of a different combination of face and reverse mesh stitches knitted on a particular arrangement of a needle bits. Each primary structures may exist alone in a modified form with stitches other than normal cleared loops or in combination with another primary structure in a garment length sequence. So first one, plain fabric, that is single jersey knit. The structure, the plain is produced by the needles. Knitting is a single set, drawing the loops away from the technical back and towards the technical face side of the fabric. It is the base structure of the ladies' ozari, fully fashioned knitwear and single jersey fabric. Plain is composed entirely of face loops or entirely of back loops. Its basic structure units is only one face loop or one back loop. The characteristics of single jersey fabrics are the appearance of the face and back differ. The technical face is smooth with the side limbs of the needle loop having the appearance of columns or waves in the base. The technical back has an appearance of columns of semicircle formed by the heads of the needle loops and the base of the snigger loops. So extensibility widthwise it is approximately twice that the length direction. It is normally has a potential recovery of 40% in width after stitching. The edges of the fabric tend to curl or roll. A run collapse of a veil will occur in a cut or exposed loop is stitched. The direction of the collapse can be either from top or bottom or vice versa. The fabric can be unravelled courses by course from the course knitted last or from the course knitted first. The fabric thickness is approximately 2 times the diameter of the yarn used. Plain is the simplest and most economical weft knitted structure to produce and has the maximum covering power. Then the knitting, produced by loop wheel or snigger wheel beard needle knitting machine, and it is produced by snigger top or open top circular lash needle machine or produced by flat knitting machine, then produced by straight bar frame or cotton machine. The second one is rib knitted structure. Rib requires two sets of needle opening in between each other so that veils of face stitches and veils of reverse stitches are knitted on each side of the fabric. The simplest rib fabric is 1 into 1 rib. It consists of alternative face and back veils, where a face veil is composed entirely of face loops and a back veil is composed entirely of back loops. There is a range of rib sets out apart from 1 into 1 rib. The most figure is the designation indicates the number of adjacent plain veils, and the second figure the number of adjacent rib veils. Singular simple ribs have more than one plain veil, but only one rib veil such as 2 by 1, 3 by 1, etc. Broad rib has a number of adjacent rib as well as plain veils such as 6 into 3 derib rib. The characteristics of rib 1 into 1 ribbers: the appearance of the face and back are identical, 1 into 1 rib, 2 into 2 rib. The extensibility of the fabric widthwise is approximately twice that of single jersey. The lengthwise extensibility is essentially the same as in the single jersey. The fabric does not curl at the edges. A run will develop in the fabric if an exposed loop is cut, as is the case of single knits, except that the direction of collapse will be from top of bottom only. The fabric can be unravelled courses by courses, but only from the end last knitted. The relaxed fabric is theoretically twice as thick and half the width of an equivalent single jersey fabric. Particularly suitable for the articles such as tops of socks, the cuffs of sleeves, rib borders of garments, and stamping for guardians. The knitting, it will be produced by body size circular rib machine, producing by double jacquard weft knitting machine. It will be produced by V-bed flat knitting machine, produced by double cylinder hosiery machines. The knitting action is: first one, clearing. The cylinder and the dial needles move out to clear the plain and rib loops formed in the previous cycle. Then the yarn feeding, the needle are withdrawn into their tricks so that the old loops are covered by the open latches and the new yarn is fed into the open hooks. Third one is knocking over. The needles are withdrawn into their tricks so that the old loops are cast off and the new loops are drawn through them. Then rib knitting action. The first one is needle timing. Needle timing is the relationship between the loop forming position of the dial and cylinder needle measured as a distance in the needles between the two stitch cam knock over points. There are three kinds of timing. First one is synchronized timing, second one is delayed rib or interlock timing, and the third one is advanced timing. The third one is interlock structure or interlock fabric. The structure is, the interlock is composed of two 1 into 1 rib fabrics locked together. It has the technical face of plain fabric on both sides, but a smooth surface cannot be stretched out to reveal the reverse loop veils. So the characteristics of interlock fabrics are: the appearance of the face and back is the same, extensibility widthwise and lengthwise are approximately the same as single jersey. The fabric does not curl at edges. A run will develop in the fabric, the direction of which will be fore and end last knitted. An interlock fabric will run less freely than single jersey or rib structure. The fabric can be unravelled from the end last knitted. Two yarns must be removed by unraveler complete knit courses. The thickness of the fabric is approximately twice that of a single jersey. Interlock relaxes by about 30 to 40%. Then the interlocking, the needle in two beds must be exactly opposite to each other, so only one of the two can knit at any feeder. Two separate cam system in each bed, each controlling half the needles in an alternate sequence. One cam system control knitting at one feeder and the other at the next feeder. The needles are set off out alternatively, one controlled from one cam system, the next one from the other. Diagonal and not opposite needles in each bed knit together. The conventional interlock machines has needle of two different lengths. Long needle knit in one of the cam tracked and short needle knit is a track nearer to the needle heads. The next one is pearl fabric, that is pearl structure. Pearl structures have one or more veils which contains both face and reverse loops. The semicircle of the needle and the snigger loops produced by the reverse loop intermeshing tend to be prominent on both sides of the structure. The characteristics of 1:1 pearl structure is same appearance, face and back, similar to the back of single jersey, highly extensible in all directions, approximately twice as extensible as single jersey in the length direction. The fabric does not curl at edges. The fabric will run in a wave direction starting from either end. The fabric may be unravelled course by course starting from either end. The fabric tends to be 2 or 3 times thicker than single jersey. The knitting process is with double-ended latch needles in some double cylinder garment length. Circular machines or half-hose machines or flat pearl machines are used. By rib loop transfer in V-bit flat machine. The next chapter is fancy stitches in weft knitting. Under that, first one is the float stitch. The structure of the float stitch will be composed of a head loop, one and more float loops and knitted loops. The float or welt stitch shows the missed yarn floating freely on the reverse side of the held loop, which is technical back of single jersey structures but is the inside of rib and interlock structure. So missing is useful for hiding an unwanted colored yarn behind the face loop of the yarn of a selected color when the producing jacquard designs in face loops of different colors. So the characteristics of float stitches are structures incorporating float stitches tend to exhibit faint horizontal lines. They are narrower because the veils are drawn closer together. The widthwise elasticity is reduced. The stability of the fabric tend to be better. So the knitting process is the knitting action will take a float loop is produced if the needle neither clear nor is fed a new yarn. Say for example, the needle remains at the run position. Thus, while adjacent needle from a new loop, the needle making the float loop merely retains the held loop. So the knitting machines are mini jacquard circular knitting machines or electronic jacquard circular knitting machines, computerized flat knitting machines or jacquard hosiery machines are used to produce these kind of structures. The next one is the tuck stitch. The structure of the tuck stitch will be composed of a held loop, one or more tuck loops and knitted loops. Its side limbs are not restricted at either fed by the head of an old loop and assume an inverted V or U-shaped configurations. The characteristics of tuck stitches are it will reduce fabric length and lengthwise elasticity because the higher yarn tension on the tuck and held loops causes them to rob yarn from adjacent knitted loops, making them smaller. Providing greater stability and sharp retention, the fabric width is increased because the tuck loops pull the held loops downwards, causing them to spread outwards and making extra yarn available from widthwise elasticity. Fabric distortion and three-dimensional relief is caused by tuck stitch accumulation. Tuck stitches are employed in according fabric to lie in the long floats produced on the back of single jersey knit miss jacquard, producing open work effects, improving the surface structure. Joining the two pieces of plain structures together to produce a double face fabric. The knitting process will be carried out in latch needle machines when a needle holding its loop also receives the new loop. In bare needle machines, when it is bare, is mispressed so that the old loop is not cast off and remains as a held loop inside the beard with the newly fed tuck loop. So the machines that can knit tuck stitches are loop wheel or snooker wheel frame, 4 or more than 4 track single or double circular knitting machines with lash needle, the jacquard circular knitting machines with 3-way selecting techniques, flat knitting machines and samboseri machines. The next one is plaiting fabric. The structure of the plaiting fabric will be contains loops composed of 2 or more yarns, often with differing physical properties, each having been separately supplied through its own guide or guide hold to the needle hook in order to influence its respective positions relatively to the surface of the fabric. Plaiting can be all over effect or on selected stitches and may be used to produce surface interest, colored pattern, open work laces or to modify the wearing properties of the structure. So the knitting process will be the perfect plaiting so that the underneath yarn does not show or flash onto the surface is difficult. The mainly controlling points are the yarn tension, angle of feed and the already formed loops. The yarn positioned nearest to the needle heads shows the reverse side of the needle loop and therefore shows on the surface of reverse stitches. The next one is the fleecy fabric. So the structure and characteristics of fleecy fabric is an inlay yarn is bind to the back of plain jersey or plaiting fabric using tuck stitches so that this yarn never knits. This is achieved using a combination of floating and tucking. So plaiting fleecy is named as 3-thread fleecy as there are 3 ends of yarn is needed. Since the laid-in yarn never knits, it is possible to use a wide variety of yarns for this purpose, particularly very thick, soft and relatively weak yarns. And inlay yarns may have count which is 6 to 8 times heavier than the optimum count of the machines. Type and gauge under normal knitting conditions. The inlaid yarns can be napped into a pile in the finishing process and the fabric can be used to make sportswear and sweatshirts. With this, today I am concluding my topic. We have seen what are the elements, what are the types and what are the characteristics of different fabrics are produced in knitting. So I thank all of you for the session.